Hi, thanks for joining me. Mindy Mandell here. So today we're going on with the Timaeus, and as you can see, we're going to talk about the unfolding of time. Also, we're going to be introduced to the junior gods. Okay, so here we go. Starting off with time, here's what Plato says about it, and as I've been doing throughout the Timaeus, all of our translations are by Robert Bury. Okay, so seeing that the model is an eternal living creature, and this was introduced in past videos, we saw that God is looking to the intelligible intellect, the home of the forms or ideas, what I've been calling absolute realities. He looks to those as the model to create our physical world. Okay, so seeing that the model is an eternal living creature, he set about making this universe, so far as he could, of a like kind. But inasmuch as the nature of the living creature was eternal, this quality it was impossible to attach in its entirety to what is generated. Wherefore he planned to make a movable image of eternity, and he set in order the heaven of that eternity which abides in unity. He made an eternal image, moving according to number, even that which we have named time. And so here we have a definition of time as a movable image of eternity. So we've seen that in the divine realms, the only motion that has been assigned to those realms is that ousia motion of turning in one's place, of intellect turning to know itself. But all of the other motions exist in the physical world. They require time to move, and time itself is moving. And so the physical world needs time, and time needs the physical world. And so those two go together. Simultaneously with the construction of the heaven, he contrived the production of days and nights and months and years, which existed not before the heaven came into being. So the two came into existence together, time and the physical universe. Time then came into existence along with the heaven, to the end that having been generated together, they might also be dissolved together if ever a dissolution of them should take place. And it was made after the pattern of the eternal nature, to the end that it might be like thereto as possible. For whereas the pattern is existent through all eternity, the copy, on the other hand, is through all time, continually having existed, existing, and being about to exist. So we're seeing again this idea of similitude continuing to unfold. Being unfolds into becoming, or the realm of generation. Eternity unfolds into time, or this perpetuality of existence. Whereas eternity is beyond time, where we're seeing that time is perpetual in the sense of that existing throughout all time. And then going on here, and also I wanted to point out, I forgot to say, I knew there was something else I wanted to say here, that there is this idea that they're not going to be dissolved because there is a providential goodness that runs through all of this, that is the supreme originating principle of all creation. Okay, wherefore, as a consequence of this reasoning and design on the part of God, with a view to the generation of time, the sun and moon and 5 other stars, which bear the appellation of planets, came into existence for the determining and preserving of the numbers of time. Okay, our understanding of astronomy and its physical science sense may have advanced since Plato's day, but what he's really saying here, what's really important here, is this idea that even though we measure time with the planets, and maybe a different solar system would have a different measurement than of time. This idea that time can be measured by planets is something that is not just by chance. And our ways of measuring time is not just by chance. Okay, now in all other respects, this world has already, with the birth of time, been wrought in the similitude of that whereunto it was being likened. But inasmuch as it did not as yet contain generated within it the whole range of living creatures, therein it was still dissimilar. So this part of the work, which was still undone, he completed by molding it after the nature of the model. So this idea of similitude unfolding further realms is going to continue. Accordingly then, as Nous perceives the forms or ideas existing in the absolute living creature, which is intelligible intellect in our metaphysical scheme. Such in so many as exist therein did he deem that this world also should possess. So they want to make the next unfolding of the intelligible ideas. The form of the divine class he wrought for the most part out of fire. So of the four elements, he's using fire to represent the gods. That this kind might be as bright as possible to behold and as fair, and likening it to the all, he made it truly spherical, and he placed it in the furnaces of the Supreme to follow therewith, distributing it round about over all the heaven, to be unto it a veritable adornment, cunningly traced over the whole. So now we're looking at the next generation of gods, the ones that oversee our physical world, often called the mundane gods. There are a few different names, and cosmic gods, and some other names are used by the Neoplatonists. Okay, each member of this class he endowed with two motions, whereof the one is uniform motion in the same spot, whereby it conceived always identical thoughts about the same objects. And that again is that motion that we call ousia. And the other is a forward motion due to its being dominated by the revolution of the same and similar. But in respect of the other five motions, they are at rest and move not, so that each of them may attain the greatest possible perfection. So I alluded to this one point in, I think it was last week's video, that soul is seen as the link between the divine and our generated world. And so it has its essence in eternity, but it has its activity in time. And that is what I think is being expressed here, this idea that these gods have the two motions because they have an activity in time, even though they have the ousia motion of having their essence in eternity. The other five motions and the six physical motions, remember, forward, backward, right, left, up, and down. The other motions have to do with ignorance, basically. And so since the gods don't have that ignorance, they have only the two motions. Okay, and Earth, who is our nurse, which is globed around the pole that stretches through all, he framed to be the wardress and fashioner of night and day, she being the first and eldest of all the gods which have come into existence within the heaven. So here we're talking about Earth not as this physical planet that we live on, but as a god, and the first and eldest of the mundane gods. And so now Zeus is going to address the junior gods. So here Timaeus is talking in the voice of Zeus and saying, this is what Zeus is saying to the junior gods. He says, gods of gods, those works whereof I Zeus am framer and father are indissoluble, save by my will. For though all that is bound may be dissolved, yet to will to dissolve that which is fairly or beautifully joined together, and in good case were the deed of a wicked one. So again, providence being the supreme originating principle of all creation. Three mortal kinds still remain ungenerated. The intelligible ideas need to further unfold. But if these come not into being, the heaven will be imperfect, for it will not contain within itself the whole sum of the kinds of living creatures. Yet contain them it must if it is to be fully perfect. But if by my doing these creatures came into existence and partook of life, they would be made equal unto gods, in order therefore that they may be mortal, and that this world all may be truly all. Do ye turn yourselves, as nature directs, to the work of fashioning these living creatures, imitating the power showed by me in my generating of you. Okay, so as reality unfolds at the later realms, then it is the junior gods that have to do the creating. Now, so much of them as it is proper to designate immortal, the part we call divine, which rules supreme in those who are fain to follow justice always, and yourselves, that part I, Zeus, will deliver unto you when I have sown it and given it origin. For the rest, do ye weave together the mortal with the immortal, and thereby fashion and generate living creatures, and give them food that they may grow. And when they waste away, receive them to yourselves again. So there is an idea that runs throughout Plato's work and also the Neoplatonists, the idea of having a rational soul and irrational soul. And so Zeus then is the creator of the rational part of the soul, but it is the junior gods that are going to weave the irrational soul. And then from here, the speech is over, and now Zeus is going to start the mixing of the individual souls. So again, our unfolding is continuing. Thus Zeus spoke, and once more into the former bowl, wherein he had blended and mixed the soul of the universe, he poured the residue of the previous material, mixing it in somewhat the same manner, yet in no longer with a uniform and invariable purity, but second and third in degree of purity. So remember, as reality unfolds, each realm exists at its proper power, but it has a more diffused unity and power than its cause. Okay, and when he had compounded the whole, he divided it into souls equal in number to the stars, and each several soul he assigned to one star. In setting them each as it were in a chariot, he showed them the nature of the universe and declared unto them the laws of destiny. And so here we see some overlap with the dialogue Phaedrus, where this is described in far greater detail. And so now here are the laws of destiny. And the first one, he states, is that the first birth should be one and the same ordained for all, in order that none might be slighted by him. We're all starting in the same place. When sown each into his own proper organ of time, and this will come up again, this idea of organs of time, they should grow into the most God-fearing of living creatures. And remember, he assigned each to its own proper star, and that's what they're referring to. Now, this third one, it must have been a student of Plato's that slipped this one in and it got past the editing. I can't think of any other reason it's there. But just for the sake of reporting what is in the text, there it is. We'll move on. Number 4. When by virtue of necessity they should be implanted in bodies, and their bodies are subject to influx and efflux, these results would necessarily follow. So when the soul is put into a body, there's going to be some issues to deal with, right? And this is what they have to deal with. Violent affections, pleasures mixed with pains, fear and anger and other emotions. Okay, so now let's go on to talk about this. So we see this unfolding from the soul of the universe all the way down to dealing with the irrational part of the soul and the difficulties of being in a body. So we're going on with our progressions here. And Timaeus goes on to say that if they shall master these affections, they will live justly, but if they are mastered by them, then they will live unjustly. And he that has lived his appointed time well shall return again to his abode in his native star, and shall gain a life that is blessed and congenial. And so here's Plato is pointing to the idea of what we might call leaving the karmic wheel of reincarnation. Nor in his changing shall he cease from woes until he yields himself to the revolution of the same and similar that is within him, dominating it by force of reason, that burdensome mass which afterwards adhered to him of fire and water and earth and air, a mass tumultuous and irrational, and returns again to the semblance of his first and best state. So again, the idea of leaving the body. Now, I mentioned before in a previous video where I talked about the motions of the universe, and I gave a little spoiler alert, said he's going to bring up this idea later in the dialogue, the idea that to be healthy means to match the motions of our soul with the motions of the universe. That is what is being pointed out here as well. It'll be pointed out even more clearly at the end of the dialogue, but here's one of the places where this idea comes up. When he had fully declared unto them all these ordinances, to the end that he might be blameless in respect of the future wickedness of any one of them, because we do have free will, he proceeded to sow them, some in the earth, some in the moon, others in the rest of the organs of time. So here again, the idea of the organs of time. And following upon this sowing, he delivered over to the young gods, or what I was calling the junior gods, the task of molding mortal bodies and of framing and controlling all the rest of the human soul which it was still necessary to add, together with all that belonged thereto, and of governing this mortal creature in the fairest and best way possible, to the utmost of their power, except in so far as it might itself become the cause of its own evils. Okay, so now the junior gods then are going to take over. So he then, having given all these commands, was abiding in his own proper and wonted state. So he's transcendent above this realm. And as he thus abode, his children gave heed to their father's command, and they obeyed it. So again, this idea of providence, that all of this is good, this unfolding, they recognize this goodness and they're acting on it, and the similitude continues. So Zeus is, in the metaphysical sense, we'd say that he's transcendent over the physical realm, and they are the immanent gods that are actually the creators then of the rest of this physical realm, the irrational soul and the realm of nature and the physical and all that. Okay, they took the immortal principle of the mortal living creature, and imitating their own maker, they borrowed from the cosmos portions of fire and earth and water and air, as if meaning to pay them back, because remember, we can leave our cycle of reincarnation, this karmic wheel, if you will, and we can return to our proper organ of time. So they took these as if meaning to pay them back, and the portions so taken they cemented together. But it was not with those indissoluble bonds wherewith they themselves were joined that they fastened together the portions, but with numerous pegs, invisible for smallness, and thus they constructed out of them all each several body. And within bodies subject to inflow and outflow, they bound the revolutions of the immortal soul. So again, as progression unfolds, we see the similitude, but at a weaker power, if you will. And so while the gods have indissoluble bonds, our souls are bound to the body with these numerous pegs, invisible for smallness, because we can separate from our bodies eventually. And the souls then, being thus bound within a mighty river, neither mastered it nor were mastered, but with violence they rolled along and were rolled along themselves, so that the whole of the living creature was moved, but in such a random way that its progress was disorderly and irrational, because now at this level we're looking at a soul that partakes of all the six motions. And so then he gives this example to describe it. He says, suppose, for example, that a man is in an upside-down position, with his head resting on the earth and his feet touching something above. Then, in this position of the man relative to that of the onlookers, his right will appear left to them, and his left right, and so will theirs to him. So everything is upside down. This and such like are just what the revolutions of the soul experience with intensity, and whether it be of the class of the same or of the other, they proclaim it to be the same as something or other than something contrary to the truth, and thereby they prove themselves false and foolish, and devoid at such times of any revolution that rules and guides. But as soon as the stream of increase and nutriment enters in less volume, and the revolutions calm down and pursue their own path, becoming more stable as time proceeds, then at length, as the several circles move each according to its natural track, the revolutions are straightened out, and they announce the same and the other aright, and thereby they render their possessor intelligent. So there's a description of a soul evolving from ignorance to wisdom. And so that brings us, there's one more wrong. Sorry, it doesn't bring us to the end. And if so be that this state of his soul is reinforced by right educational training, the man becomes wholly sound and faultless, having escaped the worst of maladies. But if he has been wholly negligent therein, after passing a lame existence in life, he returns again unperfected and unreasoning to Hades. Hades, remember, being the afterworld that includes both Tartarus and the Isles of the Blessed. And this experience of going to Hades between worlds was described in the myth at the end of the Republic. And so this brings us to the end of today's talk, where we see here the need for the education of the soul, which again was covered in the Republic. And then next week, what we're going to go on to is Plato is going to describe the mother and receptacle of the generated world. And so we'll see what that is next week. And I do hope you'll join me then. As always, if you like what you see, I would appreciate you hitting the thumbs up. Also, please think about subscribing and sharing with your friends. And if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below, or you can send me an email if you want a response from me. Okay, so thank you very much, and I do hope you'll join me next week.